So Nick and Omar have created this huge brand. They're best-selling authors. They've co-produced, Nick's co-produced an award-winning Netflix documentary and acted, and they've been in television programs. They've been on Shark Tank. Nick's been on Undercover Boss, right?
That's right.
So you guys have done incredible work. How many franchises you guys have now?
We're up to just over 200 franchise owners across the U.S. and probably comprises about 400 territories.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's incredible. So I want to go back to the beginning, though. How did you guys meet?
We met in high school in 10th grade. Detention. And we're just kind of troublemakers back then and became best friends and then kept in touch and ended up becoming business partners.
Okay. But you got to connect the dots. So how did this whole thing happen? You guys were in high school. How did the whole business partnership come to be and the whole idea?
Yes. So summer before our senior year of college, we went to university opposite sides of the country. He was at Pomona College in California, and I was at University of Miami down in South Florida. And we would link back up during summer break. My mom had this beat up cargo van that she would use for deliveries at her furniture store, and basically offered the van to do odd jobs around the neighborhood. And I invite my buddies over, Nick and a couple other friends. We're sitting around the dinner table and came up with this harebrained idea of hauling junk. And we said, all we need is a name. And, after about 2 Bud Lights, the name started to get a little bit more creative. And my mom looked at us and she was like, you guys are like the college hunks who haul junk. Looked at each other like, that's a great name. Could feel the earth move, and put some flyers around the neighborhood that said, College Hunks will haul your junk. 6 o'clock that night, cell phone rang, and we were in business. And that's what we did. And wake up 5 a.m, work till 8, 9 o'clock at night. It was the first time in our life that we found something that we were passionate about. Not that we were necessarily passionate about hauling junk, but being a small business owner, that opened up our eyes that there was this whole other world outside of school, grades, getting a job. It's like you can run a business, you can do marketing and talk to clients, and every day's a little bit different. And so that just got us super jazzed up about entrepreneurship.
Wow. Nick, what did you think of this whole idea from the get-go?
I was all in. I remember Omar, we both went back to school for our senior year of college, and Omar called me up and said, hey, I'm writing a business plan for College Hunks Hauling Junk. I'm going to put it into an entrepreneurship competition. And I was like, you're going to win. And it won first prize out of about 150 entries. We graduated, actually got regular jobs for a very brief period of time. And I remember emailing Omar, hey, what's our timeline for starting this business? He emailed me all capital letters, my timeline's right now, ! Let's do this. So, we got some skeptical looks from people when we said we were going to quit our jobs after college to haul junk and move furniture full time. They were like, you're going to quit your jobs to do what? Haul junk, and it's going to be called what? College Hunks? Are you throwing away your degree to start a trash business? Is that really a good idea? And, back in those days, shows like Shark Tank and the notion of starting a business weren't as commonplace. They were seen as very risky and dangerous to try to, pursue because, the odds were against startups. And so we wanted to try to defy those odds. And we always tell the story when we first started, we would be doing all the work ourselves. So we would be driving the trucks, answer the phone, hauling the junk. And we went out and obtained an 800 number, but it was still routed to our cell phone. So we put the 800 number on the back of the truck, and people would call to complain about driving. One of us would be in the driver's seat answering the phone saying, we'll fire those guys when they get back to the office. Thanks for reporting that to us. So, probably as Omar mentioned, did every job, in the business from the very beginning.
So Nick, just as a point of reference, like what year is this about?
So 03 was the cargo van summer. 04 was the business plan competition. 05 was when we officially declared ourselves in business full time. So 2005 up in Washington, D.C., we had one truck. We would park it at one of our parents' houses. And I think we were still living at our respective parents' houses at the time as well.
So where does franchising come into the whole play here?
So franchising came into play when it was always in the business plan. How to do it, where to do it, why to do it, unknown. But I had a buddy that went to University of Miami with me. He was in the business school. And as he was watching the business unfold in DC, he said, hey, if you ever open a franchise, I'll open one in Orlando. And so we're like, hey, we got one open. So let's hurry up and get all the documents and legal stuff done so we can start opening and selling franchises. And that's that's what we did. I think 08, 09 is when we declared ourselves open for franchising, and way too early. Didn't have all probably the systems and people that we needed, but opened that first one in Orlando and just kind of grew very slow between 2008 to probably 2015. And then 2015 is when we really hit a tipping point.
Sure. And like so many of us, we didn't know anything about franchising, right? When we started out.
Yeah. So the other thing that I remember from those early days when we were doing all the work ourselves, we started to burn out a little bit. And so we had this vision of being a national brand, but we just didn't have the knowledge of how to do it. And one of our mentors recommended to us a book called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, kind of the, the franchisee, franchisor, entrepreneur handbook. And we read it, and it was like a light bulb went off for us because it felt like it was written about us. It was talking about how to work on the business, not in it, creating systems and processes for your business to scale to the next level. And so when we read that, it kind of validated, I think, Omar's early idea and indication of wanting to become a franchise. As Omar mentioned, we really didn't know what to do. So we went to some International Franchise Association conferences. We met some franchisors, but I think and some consulting groups as well. But I think we always had this perhaps naive, maybe glamorized view of how easy it was going to be. We didn't recognize, how many wounds and how long the cavern was going to be to have to cross to be able to get to the point where we are today. Right. But that learning curve was very steep. But once we dove in, there was like no turning back.
No, there is no turning back. You don't have no choice.
Yeah, I mean, just like Nick said, it was jumping off the airplane and figuring out the parachute on the way down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the book, The E-Myth, I remember he mentioned it to me, and I'm reading it after a day of hauling junk, and I was covered in mud, and I'm like, oh man, this is really about us. And that whole idea of working on the business, creating the systems, I think it plays perfectly to franchising.
Right. And not to mention, you started franchising right during the start of the recession.
That's another good point.
If you were going to pick a time to franchise a home services business of anything, the start of the housing downturn probably wasn't the best time to do it. But as we reflect back, it probably was the best thing that could have happened to us because it forced us to become resilient, gritty, persevere, persistent, like basically all the things you hear about are intangibles in entrepreneurship. We had no choice. We felt like we were dragging an anchor through the sand. And, when we first started the business, all you had to do was park the truck out with a sign in front of it and the phone started ringing. But then once the housing market shifted, we had to get a lot more resourceful and strategic with how we made the phone ring.
All right. So we're starting out with franchising. And how did you get, besides your Orlando franchisee, how did you find your first 10 or so? I mean, that's probably the number one, number two question I get from, emerging franchisors.
Certainly some PR. PR was a big one for us.
We were on the very first episode of the very first season of Shark Tank in 2009. So that kind of helped put our brand on the map. PR was a little bit more effective back then than it is now because back then there wasn't the social media and just, getting bombarded with so many different messages and content as there is today. But brokers, word of mouth.
Yeah, it was a little bit of everything. There wasn't one specific
website portal, franchise portals.
So you get one or two from PR, one or two from some pay-per-click advertising, or one from a broker, and just very linear growth. I think we were opening 6 to 8 a year for 6 years, and then one year was like 40. So it was,
it was a breakthrough. You push against the wall long enough, eventually you're going to, stop pushing or the wall's going to move. And finally the wall started moving. And that momentum, I think, was real. And funny story about that first franchisee, though, that Omar went to college with, is he didn't have the cash at the time to buy the franchise. And so he traded us land in Central Florida that we had no use for. Still, we have no use for to this day.
Yeah, if you want some land, we got you, man.
I don't think it's appreciated in value, since 15 years ago or whatever. But that was, in those early days of franchising, it was like we needed to sell franchises. So we needed to get them awarded as best we could.
Right. Well, since there are so many folks that listen that are emerging franchisors, and they heard that little story here, how you got your first 10, they're like, yeah, but things are different now, right? They might say, so if you guys were to start a brand new concept, knowing what you know today, and times have changed, how do you think you'd sell your first 10 to 12?
Networking, probably influencers.
Yeah, I think the influence,
social media.
It's easier said than done, but I mean, I see these guys and gals on Instagram that are top 5 businesses that withstand a recession, or, you know, these businesses never go bankrupt. And, you know, it's a lot of content around that and TikTok, I guess. But I guess that's also easier said than done, because if it was that easy, we'd be doing it also. So it's tough. It's a different time. When we started, you would put an ad in the yellow pages, because we started 05. Facebook started, I think, 04. So social media was just starting. Google pay-per-click and search engine marketing was just starting. Social media was very, very new. So the PR, the blocking and tackling, like the brokers, that all really worked. Now it's a very crowded marketplace.
Yeah.
A lot.
Also, honestly, if we were to start something fresh, I would think tapping into your customer base, because your customer base is going to be a fan of the service or the brand. And, you know, whereas ours may not work because we were territory based, but if it were a retail concept or something like that, you know, they might have a friend or a cousin or, you know, an uncle or whatever that it's in another market. It might want to kind of carry the torch of being the first franchise. But those early days of franchising were probably the most difficult. I equate it to probably more difficult than having kids, to be honest with you. And I've got 4 kids, and every one of those is, you know, sleepless nights. But when you're starting a franchise, it's you know, it's tough.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.